Hey everybody, this is Mr. Wolf. We're back with another video reviewing for the state test. Today we're going to be going over perimeter, area, surface area, and volume. We'll be doing plenty of examples to prep you guys for the worksheet that you'll have to do afterwards. I think most of this should serve as review, as things you've seen or done in the past. So hopefully it won't be too much of a workload. This will just come right back to you. So let's jump into it. Perimeter is the continuous line forming the boundary of closed geometric figure. Or in other terms, it's just the outside of a shape. It's just, like, for example, this rectangle here, it's just this portion, and this portion, this portion, this portion. Just the outside of a shape. I like to think of it as the distance if I would have, like, walked the exact path of that shape around. The distance that I would have walked doing that. That's the way I've always. Let me erase what I've. Get some examples. So if we're looking at a rectangle, there are two things you want to consider. You want to consider the length and the width. And then your formula that you will get for the perimeter is 2 times the width plus 2 times the length will be equal to your perimeter. So really what you want to do when you're finding perimeter of anything is just add up the outsides. This formula here we could rewrite as width plus the length plus the length is going to be equal to our perimeter. And really all that's doing is saying, well, we're adding up this side to this side, this side to this side, and we're getting some sort of answer. We're getting that distance. I think throwing in the 2 times the width plus 2 times the length is a little bit easier way of doing it, but either way you remember it works just as good. So let's just say that in this case we have a length 4, width of 2. Well, then we can plug that in. We can use either one of these and plug it in. We'll do the top one. We'll say 2 times our width of 2 plus 2 times our length of 4 is going to be equal to 4 plus 8, which is going to be equal to 12. And that's as simple as it gets, really, with perimeter. Maybe the next example will be a little bit similar, or a little bit simpler, I should say. But we're going to be looking at square. So the square really just shares the same formula, where this is the length, this is the width. But really, with a square, all sides are equal. So you could really just say, well, 4 times the length or 4 times the width. And that's going to give you the same thing because your width and your length are going to be the same. So let's say your length is 6. Then we can say, well, if the length is 6, I know my width and length are both going to be 6, so I can just say 4 times one or the other, both equal 6, will give us our answer of 24. So with a square, remember, all sides equal the same thing, so you just take whatever your length is of one side and multiply it by 4. Now, let's look. What's going on here? My zoom keeps messing up, or my scroll. There we go. So let's say we have a triangle now. So a triangle, we'll just label the sides A, B, C, and the perimeter of your triangle is just going to be equal to A plus B plus C, and that's going to equal perimeter. So if A equals 5, B equals 8, C equals 2, we can say, well, our perimeter is going to be equal to 5 plus 8 plus 2, which is just going to be equal to 15. It's as simple as that, just adding things up and getting your answer on the perimeter. Now with the right triangle, it's the same thing. Make sure we label this our AB and C is our hypotenuse. It's the same thing, but we can solve for our C if it's not given. So once again, the perimeter is going to be equal to A plus B plus C, but let's just say that we only have A and B. Let's say A is equal to 2 and B is equal to 4. We don't know C yet, but we still want our perimeter. Well, if you guys remember, we have the Pythagorean theorem that says, well, A squared plus B squared is going to equal C squared, where A and B are our legs of our triangle and C is our hypotenuse. So we can just plug in what we have. We have 2 squared plus 4 squared is going to be equal to our c squared. Then we can just solve that out. 2 squared is 4, plus 4 squared, which is 16, is going to be equal to our c squared. So 20 equals c squared. And we just take the square root of both sides to get rid of that square, and square root of 20 is going to be equal to c. So our perimeter in this case is going to be equal to 4 plus 2 plus square root of 20, which you can get that out to be some decimal. And on the state test, it may give you the answer as a decimal version of this, or it could possibly give you the answer as something like this. But remember, you can put that square root into your calculator and get the decimal form of it. Lastly, we move on to perimeter of a circle. Now let's think about the circles unit we just finished. We didn't say anything about perimeter, but we got to think about what perimeter means. We just said perimeter is the outside of the shape, that line that really just creates the shape. Well, for a circle, instead of calling it perimeter, we call it circumference, which, if you remember correctly, circumference is equal to 2 times the radius times pi, or the diameter times pi. So if we have a radius here of 4, then our circumference would be equal to 2 times 4 times pi, which is just equal to 8 pi. So remember, circumference and perimeter they mean the same thing when it comes to circles. And you're just getting that distance around the outside. Let's move on to area. Now, area is a little bit different, but it's just as simple, in my opinion, for solving for it. So we define area as the amount space bounded by a 2D flat geometric So instead of just getting the distance around something, we're getting the distance within something. The whole, not just the distance, but the whole span of this, whatever space is taken up with inside of one of these figures. So let's look at a rectangle. Just like the perimeter of a rectangle, here we're going to want our length and our width. And all you have to do to get the area of a rectangle is multiply your length and your width. So let's say our width is equal to 2 and our length is 4. We could just say the area of this rectangle is equal to 4 times 2, which gives us 8. Not bad. Let's look at square. Square is very similar in that actually it's the same. We can think about it a little different. Same with perimeter. It is length times width, where this is our length and this is our width. But we remember with the square, all sides are equal, so the length is the width. So instead of just saying length times width, you could say, well, you could do the length squared or the width squared, or really just any side squared. So if this length was equal to 8, we could say the area of this circle is equal to 8 squared, or the area is equal to 8 times 8. And either way, you end up with your answer as 64. Now, the triangle is where things get a little bit different. With a triangle, you need more than just the measurement of the sides. You need this measurement that comes directly down from the top and creates the height, note with h, of the triangle. You also need to pay attention to the base of the triangle, so whatever the base value is. Then we have this formula, 1/2 times base times height. And one way I like to think about this is that if we were to draw another triangle next to this one, somewhere through here, what you're getting is some sort of parallelogram, or some sort of what you could call maybe a square. So when you have a triangle, you could think of it as maybe being half of a square. So that's where that 1/2 comes from. So 1/2 times base times height. Or you could write this as, this is how I like to write, base times height over 2. Either way, you get the same answer. So let's say our base in this case is 4 and our height is 6. Say, well, 1/2 times 4 times 6. Or you could say 4 times 6 over 2. In this top case, you're going to get 24 over 2. And in this bottom case, you would still get 24 over 2 as well. And either way you do that, you're going to end up with an answer 12. So for triangles, you need height and base. And what your result is going to be along the line. We use 1/2 times base times height, or base times height over 2. Area of a circle. This one should be fresh in your minds because we just did area of a circle. The last unit we did a lot of area of a circle, and it's pretty similar to circumference, but one thing you need to remember is that instead of multiplying the radius by 2, we square the radius by 2. So area of a circle is equal to our radius squared 2. So if we were given a radius of, say, 6, then we can plug in our radius and say, well, 6 squared times pi is going to be equal to 36 pi, and that is our area of the circle. Before we get too much further, I just want to go back through and read these through again just to make sure. So, perimeter, it's the distance around the object. So, you would multiply the length times width when you're working with a rectangle or a square. A triangle, well, that's for area. You would add them together, I should say. You would add the length of both sides to the width of both sides. So 2 times length plus 2 times width for the perimeter of a rectangle. For a square, you would just add together all the side lengths. For a triangle, you add all 3 of those side lengths. Remember, if you're working with a right triangle, you can solve for your hypotenuse if it's not given and add that into the addition of the other 2 sides. And then for a circle, the perimeter is just the circumference. With area, we're working with rectangles. You'd multiply your length times your width. With squares, you would multiply your length times your width. But remember, all sides are the same, so you can just square one of the side lengths. With a triangle, you need the base and the height measurement, which should be given to you, and you use this formula of 1/2 times base times height. And then with the circle, it's as simple as squaring the radius and multiplying by pi. So let's look into surface area. Surface area is a little bit different. You work with 3-dimensional figures when you're solving for surface area. Let's write out a definition. This is the amount of space inside the boundary of surface of a D figure. So really, what surface area is in a nutshell is you get the area of all sides, all faces of this 3-dimensional object, and you add them together. So with a cube is made up of squares. So if you remember the area of a square is length times width, then you can think, okay, well, we can use that same information to solve for this. So in this case, let's say we have our length down here, we have our width here, and we'll call this our height. So in this case, we know get the area of one of the sides of a square, or one of the sides, which is a square. You would just do length times width. But let's count how many sides there are. There's this top side and this bottom side. There's this left side and this right side. And there's one in the back here, and then this one up front. So there's 6 total sides to this cube. So we can just say, well, this is made up of 6 squares, and all those squares are the same size. So length times width of one square will give us the area of 1. So we can just multiply that by 6 to get the surface area of the whole cube. So with the surface area, you're just adding up the areas of each face of the 3-dimensional figure. So in this case, length times width times 6, we'll say our length is equal to 4. And remember, with a square, your width is the same. So in this case, we have 4 times 6, which would give us 16 times 6, and that would give us